Huge game at the San Siro. AC Milan versus Inter Milan on Sunday. Gabriel Marcotti joins myself and Hugh to discuss this huge game. Very exciting game. And I'm really interested to find out more about AC Milan, Gabriel, because the sort of rebuild that's happened over the last few years, it's going in the right direction. You know, second in the league at the moment, but 31 points, 110, drawn one, haven't lost a game in the league so far. But with that, there are some very important players who are a little bit more experienced, the likes of Giroud, the likes of Ibrahimovic. I was just wondering, where are we at when it comes to the rebuild of AC Milan, which I would imagine the ultimate target is to win Serie A? How do you see them at the moment as a whole entity?
Well, I'd hope the ultimate target is actually to win the Champions League multiple times, as they've done in the past. I think, to understand this, you have to understand why this ownership group got involved, right? Elliott are a hedge fund. Elliott saw an underfunded asset, and they said, let's go and try to run this club better. Let's go, and obviously, it's the usual stuff about the stadium, which they're working on, exploiting the club commercially. Yeah. But also, they said some very basic things, which were, instead of buying older players to try to win now who make more money, let's try to go with younger players who have an upside. Let's spend money on analytics. Let's spend money on scouting. And that's a big part of this team. Now, when I say, Joe, younger players, you're going to come back with Giroud and Ibrahimovic, obviously, and Simon Kjær's past 32. There is a balance there because there's also people internally who had a slightly different view. But if you look at this team top to bottom, whether it's players like Tomori and Theo Hernandez at the back, or Calabria himself, whether midfield, Benacer, Tonali, Frank Kessie was brought in by the previous regime, and they may struggle to hang on to him. But
it's still the third youngest average team actually in Serie A, that's why I think that's really interesting. Yeah. That has that mix.
Well, and the 40-year-old Ibrahimovic will tend to raise the average pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that's the approach they took. He's obviously, done with with an eye on the balance sheet, and it's money ball, if you want to use that term. And it took a while for people to buy into it, because in Italy, we have a tendency to kind of always overvalue experience, right? We have this idea, oh, look, this guy's a winner. He's a winning mentality. There's a big contrast with what Antonio Conte was doing across town when he was at Inter, when, he'd bring in guys like Vidal, Alexis Sanchez, because those guys are winners because they've won stuff. Like, yeah, okay, fine. They won stuff, Paul Scholes won stuff too. I don't know. I'd want him playing in midfield now at his age. So it's, I think they were brave. It took a while for them to really get into it. And now they're playing great football and winning games, at least domestically.
Where do they sit in terms of the title race? Okay, we know they're second in the table right now, and they've had a very good start to the season. How far has the team on the pitch moved forward this year for you? Can the likes of Olivier Giroud and Zlatan Ibrahimovic take them to a Serie A title this year?
You know what? To answer your first part of your question, I think they're a better team this year. They're a better team because Tonali is, he's had that year to settle in. He's still very young, super talented player. Brahim Diaz, who, people may remember from Real Madrid, Man City's come on really in leaps and bounds. But, you asked, can Ibrahimovic and Giroud take him to the title? I don't think they need them to take him to the title, in the sense that they're a value added. They want to make sure that in certain games when they need a big man, there's one or the other is fit. They have another very young big man named Pietro Pellegrini, who some of the nerdier in the audience may remember, because this is the guy he's this huge young center forward. He made his debut when he was just 16 years old. I think he's still the youngest player in the history of Serie A, certainly in the modern history. Then he went to Monaco for a ton of money at the age of 17, and he got injured. His career kind of never quite took off. And then he came back. He's still only, I think, 20, 21 years old. So they're hoping he can be fit. But if they do it, it's not going to be those guys necessarily. It's going to be people like Rafael Leao, who's, hugely gifted player. And I think this year is really, really kind of taken off. It's going to be that midfield. It's going to be Mike Maignan, who, is making, I don't want to say he's making people forget about Donnarumma, and he's injured now, but before he got injured, he was a phenomenal goalkeeper. He's a keeper who, of course, helped Lille win the title in France last year. So yeah, I don't think we're in a situation where Ibrahimovic and Giroud, certainly not, Giroud obviously just arrived, but when they first started doing well, you could make the point that Ibrahimovic was the center of everything and he was carrying the team at times. They were looking for him. Now I think they accept that he's not going to play every game. And Ibrahimovic himself, to his credit, has said, you know what, I'd rather be a cog in a machine than have to be the guy who carries his team on my shoulders. Not because I can't, because in his head, Zlatan can do anything, but because probably the team is better off without being focused on one guy.
So on to the game itself. Let's get a prediction out of all of us. I'll go first with an incredibly boring one. I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. I think both teams will get a goal, but I think it will be a draw, this one. I think they'll not cancel each other out, but I think it being a tight affair, and I'm going to go with 1-1. Hugh, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's going to be a really interesting contest. I know AC Milan have been so good at the San Siro already this season. It is officially their home game. Yeah, look, I actually think there's a good chance they can win this game. So I'm going to go 2-1. But I do think it's going to be very entertaining, dramatic, tense, everything that you would expect a Milan derby to be. So I'm looking forward to it. Gab, how do you?
I think there's very, very little separating these two sides. I'm not going to go for a draw because that's a bit of I'm told that's kind of fence sitting, cop out, and I do that too many times. And I generally don't like predictions anyway. But I'm going to lean Inter on this one. I'll say Inter to win 2-1. I think Theo Hernandez is a huge loss for Milan. I think he's, one of the top 3 attacking left backs in the world. He just brings another dimension to it. And the fact that he's suspended is a huge blow. The fact that Mike Maignan is suspended not suspended, he's injured. And obviously they're getting used to it, but Tatarusano's a nice keeper, but not on the same level. And most of all, I also think psychologically that draw, you always look at the last game, right? In midweek, Milan played Porto. They needed to beat them. They didn't. They were held to a 1-1 draw, and they did not play well. Inter, on the other hand, you talk about confidence boost. Okay, it was only Sheriff, but it was a game they absolutely needed to win, and they battered them in terms of creating chances. Ended up 3-1. It could have been 5-0. And I think that's big. That's really big because Inter and Inzaghi in general, more than other teams, they're a confidence team. We've seen Inzaghi in other games absolutely, just lose his rag. And getting angry. We've seen Inter get nervous, getting into getting into melees. When they're like that, they're not good. But they were out there, they were confident, and I like what they saw. So that's why I give Inter a very slight advantage here.
Hi, I'm Hugh Wisencroft from ESPN's Football Forecast. Make sure you're subscribed. You can follow all of our predictions throughout the season and get some other great analysis from our big names as well.